Hello and thanks for stopping by. This is Wrestlemania for the NES, published by Acclaim in 1989. This game is nowhere near as good as the original pro wrestling game, but at the time, this was the only WWF game we had available, back when it was called WWF and not WWE. Back in the 80s, WWF was a big deal. At least it was when I was a kid. This game had all the major players of that era. We're talking Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, the Honky Tonk Man, Bam Bam Bigelow, the $1 Million Man, and the Macho Man. When you're a little kid and you can suddenly play Hulk Hogan, him being the hero of the decade, of course you'd want to play this game. This is one of those games that you kinda need the manual to fully understand though. If you just pick this up and started mashing buttons, you'll probably be really unsatisfied, so you really need to know what's supposed to be happening. Mainly because the way you perform certain moves is not the same for each character. Actually, it's a huge hassle to have even the slightest variation in button presses, and here, the difference that they have is actually quite frustrating at times. Basically, there's a grid of moves in the manual that explains the differences between the characters. The biggest problem is the button press for how you pin your opponent. I have to say, of all the things you could change between characters, of all the different variations that they could have possibly done, having variance in pinning your opponent, that's a problem, because that's the most important part of the game. For 6 characters, 4 have one pin combination, and 2 have a different pin combination. That is really frustrating, especially if you're in the middle of a match and are mashing on the control pad to try to pin your opponent. That should be one of the easier things to do. Now you're just mashing buttons at random and wondering if the game is broken. Everyone has a basic move if you press the A button. The A button will likely punch, but 1 or 2 people will actually headbutt instead. The B button will kick for most people, but 1 person will actually have an eye gouge in place of a kick. If you press the A button and up or down, 2 of the characters in the list will attempt to pin their opponent, while 4 of them will try to do a headbutt. Okay? If you press B and up or down, 4 people will attempt to pin their opponent, and 1 of them will perform an eye gouge. 1 will also do nothing. Nothing. I find that so strange. That doesn't make it easy if you want to switch characters while you're playing. I'm staring at the attack grid in the manual, and I can't help but notice that they've missed so many opportunities here. What about left in A, or left in B, or right in B, or right in A? There's plenty of room on the controller for additional moves that they never took advantage of. The original Pro Wrestling for the NES did much more with the button presses, and it was definitely more consistent. If you press towards the ropes here and press the A button, you're going to run into the ropes. If you press the A button while running, you can perform a drop kick, or if you're Andre the Giant, you'll just barge into people. Running and pressing B does nothing, except for 1 character, Bam Bam Bigelow, who will perform a cartwheel. If you're facing away from your opponent and you press A and B together, you'll perform some sort of a back punch or an elbow. If you're facing an opponent and press A and B, you'll possibly perform a body slam, except for 2 people who do nothing, once again. Nothing with the button combination. Now I know this is an NES game, and it's been a long time since it was released, and it's possible that they ran into space limitations on the cart. I get that. NES games had to fit into a certain size. If that's the case, I would still try to simplify the basics. Give everyone the exact same button scheme. Then you can give everybody 1 or 2 special moves maybe? That's what I try to focus on anyway. Also, I would make the characters, or at least some of them, have similar body types so you can exchange the graphics between them. Then you can change the colors or the heads to make them appear different. It would save space on the cartridge, and that's kinda what they did on the Pro Wrestling Black Box game. Also, everyone should have 2 running moves off the ropes. Here, only 1 person has 2. Everyone else only has 1. There are also Energizer power-ups that run across the top of the screen from time to time. They're differently shaped, 1 for each character, and if your shape floats by, you can run up and grab it and get a bonus. Honestly, I feel like this aspect of the game is a total waste. I would have used that space on the cartridge to do, well, anything else. It's so rare that you can run up and grab these to begin with. Honestly, it's better to worry about playing the game as opposed to hoping for a random power-up. It's just wasted effort. So at its core, we have a clunky game with limited moves and confusing button presses that vary between characters. You can also get yourself into a spot where neither you or your opponent can hit each other. If you go up near the turnbuckles on the left or right, I've gotten into this position a few times. Maybe in a two-player game it's not such a big deal because you're going to be moving around more, but if you're playing solo, you can certainly box in an opponent at times, and you get yourself in a spot where neither of you can hit each other for a while. I will say here though that this game has a crazy amount of nostalgia. If you're from that time, you're probably going to enjoy it even though it's clunky, even though it's awkward to play, and it's not that good overall. As bad as I think this is, I still enjoy playing it. Also, the music here is actually really good. The music will change depending on which character you're playing, and Hulk Hogan's theme music from the 80s is portrayed here. Hulk was a huge hero back then, and just to hear his theme music and see his likeness, this probably sold more cartridges than any of the other wrestlers combined for this game. Honestly, it's nice to have a WWF property, even if it is just a boring button masher near the start of wrestling games for consoles. There have been plenty of other games over the years, of course. This was one of the first. It's not a terrible game, I guess. Just compared to the Pro Wrestling Black Box game on Nintendo, this one is definitely lacking. Well, that's all I have for Wrestlemania for the NES. Thanks for giving this one a look, and I'll catch you next time.